Kettlebell Drenga. Rating season is upon us once again. The 5th annual Twin Cities Kettlebell Open is coming, and registration is now open. On Saturday, September 13th, the steel will ring out once more at Northbound Training in Little Canada, Minnesota. Honorable warriors will test their mettle in person or through online video submission, all for their chance at glory. Fight for your clan, fight for your name, claim your spoils and your glory. Early entry is just $100, with raffle prizes for all competitors and cash prizes for the top in-person performers. Every lifter enters the battle. A few leave legends. Go now to TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com to register today. Come, answer the call of battle, sign up today, and may your name forever ring out in the Hall of Champions. Go to TwinCitiesKettlebellClub.com. Twin Cities Kettlebell Club. And our mission is to become our best selves through sport. Now, this episode, we're going to get real for a second. The gap between our ambitions and our actual bandwidth, well, that's where life happens. That's where burnout really lives. To many of us, myself included, we don't adjust as that gap shows up. We just keep grinding harder, pulling a shoresy, and go till we can't go no more. And eventually, we can't. Now, this episode is about what comes next when you've fallen out of rhythm, when you've lost the thread and you're not quite sure where to pick it back up. And I want to be clear, this isn't a shame spiral episode. This is about reflection, reconnection, and recommitment. For me, it started with a hard look at where I'm at right now. Not where I wish I was, not where I used to be, but a real honest reflection and a decision to let go of any shame or guilt and get back to who I know that I am, and more importantly, who I aspire to be. Now, I didn't fall off. I made intentional choices based on the season of life that I was in. Choice to focus my bandwidth on my work, my coaching, my family, and navigating some personal health issues. But in doing that, I also lost sight of a few core pillars that align with the person that I'm working to become. I won't bury the lead. The most important thing is to start. Take imperfect action, reflect, and refine. And if that's all you take away from today's episode, I'm good with that, because it's true. That alone is enough to shift the tide. That's the short path. The short path is the first spark, that moment of action that can ignite motivation like lighter fluid. But the long path, that's the system, that's planning, that's chopping the wood that you need to build a fire and carrying it back to camp. That's making sure that you have enough fuel for a sustainable fire that will carry you through the night, and dousing it in the lighter fluid and dropping the match. So in this solo episode, I'm going to walk you through how I'm navigating my own return, what a successful day and week look for me like now, and how I'm creating success bandwidth instead of chasing perfection, and how signing up for a competition and maybe a little challenge from my friend Matt Boris gave me the structure that I needed to anchor back in. So let's get into it. All right. Welcome in to this week's episode of the Platform Podcast. This one's going to be a solo episode because, as I just alluded to in the intro, I'm focused on myself and how I am trying to get myself back on track with everything that's been going on. So I really want to make sure that I'm a little bit forthcoming here about what led to me falling off. Well, I didn't fall off. Like I said, I didn't fall off. But people probably have noticed I've actually gotten some questions about, why I'm not publishing as often or when the next episode is coming out. I've actually had people ask if I'm still making the podcast, and that's all fair and reasonable questions. But I want to be first transparent about what's been going on with me and why I've been a little bit less consistent with my production of the podcast. It's a few things. First, I took a new job about a year and a half ago, which was a fantastic opportunity for me and my family. And it's been incredibly demanding and fun and stressful and challenging and rewarding and all of the wonderful things that come with, leveling up in your career. I have the opportunity to lead strategy, in the AI initiatives for a much larger company than I was working for, which required me to grow and stretch. And it has been a really fun personal challenge, but that also means that I'm working more, even though I had thought that maybe I would actually have a little bit more work-life balance, but I'm actually working a little bit more or differently than I was in my previous role. I'm not complaining. I just want to be clear about that. I love the new job, and I realize in times like this, I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I am in. I have worked my ass off to get there as well, so I am not trying to be falsely humble and say that it's a product of luck, because it's not. But luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So I am fortunate to have gotten an opportunity, but I've also worked my ass off to create that opportunity for myself. So, trying to lean into a little bit more of ownership of the success that I've had and not attribute it too much to luck, but also recognize that luck also plays a huge part in the opportunities that we have and the success that we had. So that's taken some of my bandwidth, as well as really focusing a lot on coaching. I've got a whole bunch of excellent athletes that I cannot wait for y'all to see what they're going to do. We've got the WKSF World Championships coming up here in June. I've got a few people that are going that are just absolutely going to destroy, and I'm really excited to see what they can do on the platform. They've been working incredibly hard, and I know if they can do what their training indicates that they can do, that we're going to have some really good successes to talk about on the platform. So that's been a part of it as well. And then, being a dad, I've got 2 kids. My daughter is playing goalie for a hockey team and playing softball as a catcher. And my son, Rowan, has started playing lacrosse. So I'm also doing that. And, my wife still works as an ER nurse overnights, which means there are nights when I am taking care of the kids and doing all the things and what have you, which is also part of it. And then, there's also been, I got a diagnosis of muscle tension dysphonia, which is basically a medical condition where you carry too much tension in your vocal cords, which has made it actually difficult for me to speak as much as I usually can or have in the past, which is really weird, especially when you're trying to make a podcast. And coming from my life being a singer my entire life, having anything going on with your vocal cords is incredibly concerning. It basically, for me, manifests in feeling like I need to clear my throat constantly, not being able to do the same type of vocal strain that I was capable of before, et cetera, et cetera. So it may be a product of, of just overuse over the years, or it could be a byproduct of medication, side effects. There's a number of things that it could be, but the long and short of it is I haven't been able to talk as much as I previously have, and I can't yell like I used to. I can't sing like I used to, which is really disconcerting for me, but hopefully that will be subsiding as I get into, therapy and all of those things. But, because of the wonderful American medical system, I had to jump through some hoops and wait for specialists to be available and what have you. So starting to work through figuring that out. And so there's been a lot of shit going on that has been part of the reason why I chose to take some time back and step away a little bit from the podcasting and really focus a little bit more on some other areas of my life. And then I also had some struggles going on physically with my knee. I have an arthritic right knee. Don't let your sons play offensive line. I had multiple knee surgeries over the course of my football playing career, and that, those routine those routine knee surgeries to clean up your knee that you hear about is actually a really good way to end up with arthritis in your knee, because they just, shave off cartilage, take a little bit out, etc. And especially when you're, playing at 280 to 300 pounds in a bent knee position all the time, you end up putting a lot of wear and tear on your knee in a short period of time. So I have some knee issues going on that were really giving me a hard time, especially the last year. They really started giving me a hard time during my kettlebell sport training. So I needed to take some time away and work on some other things to hopefully alleviate some of that. And now I am getting back into kettlebell sport training again. And I'm very excited about that. We'll see how I can do, cross yourself, throw salt over your shoulder. I'll take any good juju I can get, but it's been a journey. So with all that said, those are my reasons why I have been a little bit disconnected. But I also want to be pretty clear that I am also not happy with the lack of consistency and some of the choices that I made. I'm looking to get back to some of the things that I know lead to me being successful. I overcorrected a little bit in stepping away from some of the things to make space for other areas that I thought I needed to spend more time focusing on. Led me to fall off on some of the habits that I had been really consistent with for many years that had led to a lot of success with me being able to keep my weight in control. I never got my weight out of control, thankfully, but I haven't managed my stress as proactively. And when I can't train kettlebell sport, I'm not going to lie, I don't work out nearly as consistently when I can't train kettlebell sport, because I haven't found another thing that I love to do nearly as much as kettlebell sport. Aside from throwing axes, that is a new habit that I've picked up, which if you follow me on Instagram, you see that I started chucking axes in my backyard, but that's not obviously the same level of intensity physically as doing thousands of kilos worth of work. So I really wanted to get back into establishing some of the patterns that really helped me be successful and get to the point that I've been at in my life and in my career. And so I really had to take a step back and really think about, how do you get back on track after you've fallen off? And, I've heard from a number of people that I work with that I'd worked with in the past who had success and really done very well, stepped away from working with me for various reasons. They wanted to do other things than kettlebell sport, or they had work and family and things, the same types of reasons that I just alluded to that led to me stepping back a little bit. And anytime somebody decides that they want to work with somebody else, or they need to step back from kettlebell training, or they are stepping back from training altogether, I never take it personally. It's always something that I look at in the same way that I hope, the same level of grace that I would hope to receive, right? In that it's not personal. It's what they need to do. It's what they feel they need to do that's right for them at that time. And, those things are always important. But I've also reconnected with many of those people over the past, 3 to 6 months. I've had several people reach back out to me who have quote unquote fallen off. And they're like, man, I need to get back on track. And how do I get back on track? And that's really what we want to talk about today, the short and long path back, right? So as I said already, the short path back is to start. Get started right now. Reconnect through action. Action creates momentum, and momentum creates motivation. Most people get it backwards. They think that they need to get motivated, and then that will help them take action. That is backwards. I'm going to say that again. Do not wait for motivation to get started. Get started now. Do something. If you are already thinking that you need to get back on path, or that you need to get back to doing what you were doing before, you need to do something, I need to get back on track, pick something and get started. Not Monday, not next week, not when the time is right, not when you have more money. Find something that you can do right now. motivation is not going to come until you start doing something. And it's amazing how when you start doing something, the motivation comes because you feel that progress. Action eats anxiety. Action eats apathy. So start taking some type of motivation, or start taking some type of action to create motivation, right? That action will start creating momentum. And there's honestly two approaches that I like to work through with people. It's one of two questions, or one of two paths. And I ask one question: what is either the smallest action that you could take that would start creating some positive momentum, or what is the longest lever that you can pull that will create the largest sense of momentum? So it might not be the easiest thing, but it might be the thing that gets you the most momentum going forward. And this is kind of a personal thing. Some people really just need, especially if you've been kind of stuck in a rut for a while, some people just need to start with a really small thing. It might be as simple as starting to drink, 32 ounces of water a day. If you haven't been drinking any water, right? Getting started on small changes, right? Taking your vitamin every morning. Like, that's literally one thing. Take a pill and slug it down with a little bit of water. That can be one thing that can start getting you back on track, that can start creating momentum. It can be that small, right? But it needs to be an action, and planning is not an action. I know I love planning. Planning is invaluable, but plans are worthless, right? Actions are what matter. Planning is not an action. Start taking an action. So again, it can be something really small, or it can be something really big. If you're somebody that's like, you know what, I could do 10 little things, but that's not going to make me feel like I'm doing anything important. Cool. What's the one thing that you could do that would make the biggest impact? If that's cutting out sugary drinks, right? Maybe you're somebody that drinks energy drinks or soda, and you know that shouldn't be something that you do. And you know that's a huge thing that's holding you back from your health and wellness journey, right? That can be the one thing that you start with. Maybe it's quitting drinking alcohol. For some people, that is a huge thing. It might be quitting smoking. Not a small thing, but it could be the longest lever that you can pull on to start creating positive momentum. And if you pull that long lever and you really get a boulder moving, right, it can pick up a lot of momentum very quickly. So again, that's pretty personal, but I very much believe that you should pick short-term actions that you want to focus on, and pick one, maybe two, at most three that you're going to start with that can really help you get started. Start generating momentum by taking action. So I always recommend make this personal. Like I was just alluding to, think about who you are and what works for you. If you have tried to take big changes in the past and you go for like a week and then fall off, don't start with the longest lever, right? Start with small things and really just try and accumulate small wins. That's the habit that works for most people, is starting with small things, picking a few small things, and then just incrementally building, right? That's the atomic habits approach. If you're familiar with James Clear, huge recommend pick up the Atomic Habits book, read some of his stuff. It's all about how you can go about habit formation. So think about what's worked for you in the past. Think about what has not worked for you in the past, and really try and make it personal. Also reflect on what triggers your setbacks, right? If you know that when you have family vacation that you fall off your nutrition plan, or you know that when you have a really stressful period at work because your work is largely seasonal, or you have a really high stress period of work, know that trigger is coming. Reflect on what those things are. Reflect on your environment, right? Does having alcohol in the house make you more likely to drink it? That's one for me. Having bourbon in the house on a regular basis makes it really hard for me to say no to having a bourbon. there are certain things that I can have around that I don't drink nearly as regularly, like tequila. Doesn't do it for me the same way bourbon does. I enjoy tequila, but not in the same way that I do bourbon. So I can have a bottle of tequila that sits in the house and I don't really have that much desire to drink it. But good bourbon, hard for me to say no to. So that's a trigger for me. Having freaking Girl Scout cookies in the house is another trigger for me. I hate when it's Girl Scout cookie season because there's just cookies in the basement all the time and it's really easy for me to grab them. So knowing what your triggers are, both emotionally or environmentally, right? Understanding what those things are. And then just really thinking about how can you either reduce friction in your environment to start establishing the habits that you want, or increase friction in your environment to remove the bad habits that you don't want. So not having bourbon in the house is increasing friction. If I really want a bourbon, I got to drive to the liquor store and buy a new bottle. Or I have to go to the bar, have to be out with friends, setting parameters around it, right? Increasing the friction that it takes for me to fall off of that habit, or reducing the friction that it takes for me to establish a good habit that I want. That's the whole veggie bucket in the fridge thing that Matt and co talk a lot about, right? That's really setting up your environment for success. So create short aligned actions that fit with your current energy capacity and goals. Make sure that they're personal to what works for you, and either reduce friction for the habits that you want to establish or increase friction for the habits that you don't want to take root or that you want to uproot, right? So that's the short path. That's the reconnecting through action, right? And I think it's really important to talk a little bit about the long path stemming from a place of identity, not shame, not your past, and really thinking about an aspirational identity. Who are you and who do you want to be? If you can answer those two questions, you can really start articulating the long-term actions that are going to help form you into the person that you want to be. And that really is how you start building the long path back. That is building the system, because if you only build a system around actions, you're not going deep enough. Actions are great. I love being a goal-oriented person. I'm a very driven individual, and a lot of people that I work with are very goal-driven individuals. I think there's probably something in the psychological profile of people that gravitate towards kettlebell sport that we're achievers, because you've got a concrete goal that you're going for. I'm going to hit 70 reps in long cycle in 10 minutes on 16 kilos, and that's going to achieve me rank 1. And then I'm going to go to 20 kilos and I'm going to hit 75 reps, and that's going to hit CMS. And then I'm going to go to 24 kilos and I'm going to hit 75 reps, and that's going to get me master of sport, right? Or whatever your ranks are, right? Or whatever your goals are, right? But that can be very beneficial, but it falls short of helping establish an identity, because I can tell you from someone who has over-indexed on achievement at various points in my life, the problem is the high from an achievement is very short-lived for achievement-based personalities. It is almost like the expectation is that you are going to achieve that goal, and when you do it, it's like, okay, I did what was expected of me. Now what's the next goal? And there is so little reward from the achievement because it's what you expect of yourself. But when you fall short of the achievement, there is a cycle of shame, guilt, regret that can trigger identity crisis. And that is problematic. And that's why I think that those type of achievement goals can honestly be antithetical to becoming the person that you want to be, because it's more about deciding who you want to be and then aligning your actions to those things rather than what you want to achieve, right? Being the type of person that does certain things in certain situations is far more important than what you actually achieve. And I can render this explicit, giving you a concrete example. Being someone who lives a healthy lifestyle can be achieved through any number of physical outlets, right? But being someone who defines their identity by being, I don't know, we'll say a football player, like I did when I was in high school and college. I considered myself an athlete, but I considered myself a football player first and foremost. That was my primary expression of my athleticism. And when I got hurt and could no longer play football, I really struggled with my identity. Who am I if I am not a football player? Because I had attached my identity to what I do, right? To a particular activity, as opposed to I'm an athlete, or I am a person who works hard and enjoys being part of a team, right? Those are things that are more abstract and more conceptual and can apply to other areas of your life. It took me a while to land on the fact that what it was about football wasn't really about football specifically. It was that I was a competitive person who liked working hard and doing hard things, especially with a community of people around me who were counting on me to do my job and for the greater achievement of something larger than myself. It gave me that sense of community and that sense of achievement and that sense of sacrifice for a goal bigger than myself. That was really what football was about for me. But it took me a long time to understand that about myself. So I had oriented my identity around what I was doing instead of what it meant for me as a person, what the character that I was trying to build in myself, that I was trying to develop for myself. So I think it's really important that you reflect on who are you as a person and who do you aspire to be, and start to choose actions that align with that desired identity. That's how we go about shifting our personal perception of who we are. And that is the key to sustainable success in any health and wellness journey. And I would say in almost any aspirational journey, you have to start aligning your actions with who you aspire to be, the character traits that you aspire to embody, right? So I think it's really important that we build that identity as the basis of the long-term system that you want to establish. So once you've established what that identity is and who you want to be and who you aspire to be, and that can change over time. It's never set in stone. You can reflect on that regularly, and I recommend that you do, right? Because we all are dynamic beings who change over time. So it's really important that you do change over time and reflect regularly. But start with who you want to be. What are those virtues that you really want to develop in yourself? And then start thinking about what is the system that you can put in place to allow yourself to become that person. What are the behaviors that you need to do on a regular basis that are reflective of those values? And how can you design your life around that, right? And start thinking about what I call your success bandwidth. So for me, this past year and a half, my success bandwidth was largely committed to more of it being focused around work, my 9-to-5 job, and then, another large chunk of it being committed to the success of my kids in what they're doing, because they're at a really precious age, right? My son is 9 years old and my daughter is 10, turning 11. They're right at that age where it's basically halftime for me as a parent, which spins me out even to think about, right? You get them 90 or 95% of the time that you're going to spend with your kids happens in the first 18 years of their life, right? So I'm at halftime and I really need to be focusing my bandwidth on spending time with my kids whenever I can, because once they're 18 and out of the house, I'm not going to get a lot of that time or opportunity back. So I'm really trying to think about what success looks like for me, build my life around that. And you have to allow for what real life looks like and not what you wish it was. So not just the ideal days where everything falls in line and you're like, oh, I can get up on time and help my kids get to school. And then my first meeting isn't until 10 o'clock. So I've got time to organize my thoughts. And then, I'm able to be done at 5 o'clock and get the kids off the bus and have dinner as a family and all of those things and get my workout in. And great. That might be an ideal day, but how often is that your real life? For me, not regularly. So I've really had to start looking at what are the anchors that I really need to make sure happen within a week, because my ideal days are very few and far between. And if I can zoom out just to the week level, it really helps. I do look at everything on the day-to-day level as well and think about what I need to accomplish that day and try and prioritize that day. But it actually, for me, starts by planning the week. So working with Matt Boris, we have established some things that are kind of like my anchor behaviors that I'm focused on that align action around who I want to be. And, so for me, it's 3 strength training sessions a week. And it's modality flexible, because rather than saying it needs to be 3 kettlebell sport sessions, I have realized that as much as I would like for it to be 3 kettlebell sport sessions every week, if my knee starts flaring up because jerk is crushing me or long cycle's crushing me, I might not be able to do 3 kettlebell sport sessions a week, or I might need to do some other adjunct style of training to help improve my knee function. Or I might be traveling because I'm in South Dakota with my kids on family vacation and we didn't bring my bells with me. Typically, I bring at least 1 kettlebell with me, but we'll say for the sake of argument that I didn't actually bring a kettlebell along with me. I give myself some flexibility built in to that anchor habit of saying I'm going to do strength training 3 times a week, because that can be squats, that can be push-ups, that can be burpees, that can be stone lifting, that can be any number of things, right? And it can be a kettlebell sport, of course, but it's not a requirement that it's kettlebell sport. So giving myself some flexibility built in, again, accommodating for real life, not just what the ideal looks like. The ideal would be that it's kettlebell sport 3 to 5 times a week, but that's not what it always is. So that was habit number 1. Habit number 2, focusing on my protein intake, because for me, that is positive displacement of negative tendencies. If I am eating 180 grams of protein every day, it is far less likely that I'm going to overeat on carbs. It's far less likely that I'm going to overeat on fat. Just because protein is more filling, it's actually my preferred fuel source. I am a carnivore by nature. I enjoy steak and eggs and fish and chicken and all of those things. So that's actually what I gravitate towards anyways. So pretty low friction habit for me to say I want 180 grams of protein 5 times a week. I said every day, but we actually set the goal again with some flexibility built into it, because ideal versus real, right? So we're building towards real rather than ideal. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Getting 180 grams of protein 5 times a week is going to be good. And if I'm doing that 5 times a week, I'm probably going to start doing it 6 times a week pretty regularly too, just because we're creatures of habit. We get used to eating a certain way, right? So that's actually not been that much of a struggle for me to hit that number, but it does build in flexibility so that if on a particular week I only hit it 5 times that week, that's okay. I was still successful that week. I'm not setting myself up for failure by saying I'm going to do that every single day. So building in some flexibility, optimizing for real life versus ideal life, right? So those are my first 2. And then the third one was weigh in once a week, not daily, not skipping it altogether because I don't want to see what the scale has to say. holding myself accountable to weighing in once a week. That again is an outcome of what I was recommending before, reflecting on what has worked for me in the past and reflecting on what triggers have been for me in the past. If you've listened to this podcast, you know I have a history of disordered eating, right? I have a history of some body dysmorphia and some obsessive thoughts, some anorexia, some bulimia, et cetera, et cetera. So if I start tracking every single thing that goes into my diet, and if I start weighing in every single day, it can very quickly become an obsessive path. That has been a trigger for me that has led me down a bad path. So I reflected on what my triggers for setbacks are, and some of that is actually over-indexing on obsessive all or nothing thinking. So I'm trying to accommodate for real life and say, I'm going to weigh in once a week to keep track of my weight, but not obsessively track everything that I eat and how my weight fluctuates day to day. And then we threw in a fourth one. Again, everyone's different. For me, this was a combination of things that I thought were going to be fairly easy for me to achieve. And then I threw in one more that is a longer lever for me, which is limiting my drinking to 4 drinks per week as a target. I want to not be drinking as much as I had been drinking. I tend to go too far when I drink more than a couple of drinks in one sitting. So I'm really just trying to mediate and moderate that. And that's been an ongoing thing for me. I have successes and failures, peaks and valleys. I kind of go through phases with it, but I've had a lot more success in mediating that, especially over the last few years. It hasn't been nearly as problematic for me, but it is one of those things that when I'm trying to drop body weight, that I know that when I go over a handful of drinks a week, that it becomes really challenging for me to lose any body weight. And that is ultimately my goal right now, because I want to take some pressure off of my knee. I want to drop some body weight. So I don't have any problems, saying that's something I'm aspiring to. So that number 4 is one that's a target. It's aspirational for me. It's not something I'm holding myself to yet, but it is one that I'm building towards and I'm making progress towards and really trying to reflect on that. So those are just a few things, right? Finding those anchor habits and really starting to build a system around what does a successful week look like for me. And once you start establishing what successful weeks look like for you, you can start looking at successful months and you can start looking at successful periods, right? So we start looking at mesocycles, and you can start then planning on, 8-week fat loss cuts. But you can't do a fat loss cut if you don't have solid habits established before that. So you have to go through this period of really building the system and laying the foundation and figuring out what those habits are for you and aligning those to that identity that you really are seeking to forge for yourself. And I think it's important that you engineer your environment for consistency rather than intensity, right? Again, anybody can do something really hard for a short period of time, but what can you do in perpetuity is really what the key is to long-term success. If you can't do it in perpetuity, then it's probably not going to be something that you'll be able to sustain. You might be able to achieve results, but you might not be able to sustain them if the habits that you use to achieve them are not sustainable for you. And for me, part of the thing that is important for the long path or the system is competition as an accountability anchor. So that was part of the reason for making sure that I'm signed up to lift at my own competition, letting Matt pick what we were going to do for the Cooper Cup Challenge, since I throttled his ass last year at the Tactical Snatch Challenge. He got to suggest what we were going to do. We agreed to it. I mean, he didn't get to pick it. He didn't just get to decide. I said we should do 32 kg jerks, but he didn't want to do that. So instead we landed on 20 kg 5-minute triathlon, but it's been awesome. Honestly, all shit talking aside, as much as Matt and I love to talk shit back and forth, it's good natured and it pushes both of us to achieve more. I know he does genuinely want to back that shit talking up, and so do I, which is great, right? Because we're using competition as an accountability anchor for each other and for ourselves, right? I know that when I have someone that I'm competing against who I do genuinely want to beat, that I also can beat. No offense, Matt, but I think you know that when I try and compete against Sarah Fornero, I often set myself up for failure, as most of us do. So I'm trying to make sure that I have competition as an accountability anchor that is also somewhat realistic for me, but regardless of whether you're competing against somebody else, there's, you can set competition as accountability anchor by putting down money, right? You register for an event, you pay for your hotel room, you pay for your flight, right? You tell people that you're going. Now you're committed both financially and emotionally to start being the person that you are saying that you want to be, aligning your behaviors to that person that you are striving to become, that person that can show up at a competition and compete and win, right? That is a really key part of that long path back, building that system, at least for me. I think competition is a huge part of it. It doesn't have to be competition for you, but there needs to be accountability. That's really the most important part. There needs to be accountability to others, a coach, a friend, a loved one. I think that's really important. Accountability to yourself is still ultimately the most important part of it. But when you're trying to get back on the path and you're trying to build out a system, having a system, a support system in place that is sustainable requires that you have people around you who know what you're aspiring to be and who you say you want to be and what you're trying to achieve, and that will hold you accountable to those aspirations. So I think that's a really important part of it. It doesn't have to be competitive necessarily, but having people that will hold you to that commitment of self-improvement, I think, is a huge part of it, holding you to that identity and holding you to the behaviors that align with that identity. All right. The last part is the integration piece, and that is reflecting, resetting, realigning, and repeating, right? So reflect on what works and resetting on the things that haven't worked, or realigning them to different behaviors if things aren't working. So for me, that's weekly check-ins. What's been working? What's not working? What do we need to adjust? Right? Matt and I check in every weekend. We have a 30-minute call to check in with each other, 15 minutes apiece. What's been working for me? What's not working? What do I need to adjust? He gives me feedback, and we flip the script, and we just are coaching each other, right? Helping each other be accountable to one another and to really push each other so that whoever wins the Cooper Cup Challenge this year, it's going to be me, that we know that we are pushing ourselves, but holding ourselves to be at our best, right? I also think it's important that you let go of perfection. That has been a struggle for me for a long time. I'm getting a lot better about it than I used to be. Perfect can be the enemy of good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Progress is progress. Perfection is not real. Let go of perfection. Build rhythms that you don't need to escape from. Build a life that you don't need a vacation from. Right? Vacations are great, don't get me wrong. Spend time away from your job, spend time with your loved ones, right? But if you need a vacation to be able to sustain the life that you live day in, day out, week in, week out, you probably haven't oriented your life in a sustainable way, right? So build rhythms that you can sustain and that you don't need to escape from, right? And then I think it's really important that you reassess at a regular interval. For some people, that's monthly. For some people, that's at the end of their competition cycles. I think there should be assessment periods at regular intervals. I like to do a daily top 5 things that I want to achieve in that day, or most important things that I want to get done that day, and then the things that I need to get done that day. I also like to reflect on how my week went and then how my month went, right? And then when I get to the end of a competition cycle, how did my training cycle go? What went well? What didn't go well, right? So really reflecting and then reassessing and realigning based on what those things are and repeating the cycle. But I think it's also important to say everyone is different. So my challenge to you is to define your own comeback plan, right? If you're looking to get back on track, take the things that I've talked about today and make them your own. This is a framework. It is not a prescription. Everyone is different. Figure out what works for you. Customize it for what works for you. Everyone's triggers are different. Everyone's success factors are different, right? There are a lot of things that translate across a large number of people. We're all very similar in what makes us happy and what makes us well, but how those things are manifested in individual lives is highly individual because our backgrounds are individual, our lives are individual, what motivates us is individual. So I challenge you to customize it and define your own comeback plan. If you need help with that, I recommend that you reach out to a coach, right? I'm a coach. Matt's a coach. There are a lot of great coaches out there. Find one that's a good fit for you. Find somebody that gets you. Find somebody that can hold you accountable and that you can sustain working with. If you could have the best coach in the world, but if they're, $700 a month as a financial commitment and you can't sustain that, they're not the right coach for you, right? Maybe they can be a good coach for you in a short burst and you learn as much as you can from them and then you move on. But it is also important that you think about what's sustainable for you. So share your commitment for your comeback with somebody. Put it in the comments of this podcast, put it on the YouTube channel, put it on Instagram, put it on social media, DM me, tag the episode, send it to a friend, do something that defines what success looks like for you. And let's get back on the path to success together. Let's hold each other accountable. Find a community of people that lift you up, that hold you to that higher standard that you want to achieve for yourself, that you aspire to be, because that's what we're all about. We're trying to become the best version of ourselves the day that they burn our body. Don't ever peak. All right. With that, I'm going to sign off and wish you good luck. And hit me up if you have any questions. I would love to hear about your successes, love to hear about your challenges. Till next time, we'll see you on the Platform Podcast.